Pals of Reddit, did you ever have a guy that you wished you said yes to when he asked you out? What is the story? Story 1. In 4th grade, a boy passed me a note asking me whether I'd be his girlfriend. Circle yes or no. I was caught off guard, but my friend sitting next to me wasn't. I believe she said, "You, rip it up." And I did. He was a nice kid. I should have circled yes, and I really shouldn't have ripped it up. That was very rude of me. Sorry, Jeremy. Story 2. My grandma just told me this story. In high school, she met this guy. He was very intelligent, fairly good-looking, and greatly humorous. She really liked him, and she was very aware that he likes her as well. So one day, he finally asks her out and she rejects him. My grandma continues to say about how he turned out so well with money and a really nice life. So I asked her, "Well, why did you reject him?" And her exact words were, "I couldn't date a ginger." Ah, old people. Edit. Best part is she ended up having a red-headed son. Story 3. It was freshman year of college. I made eye contact with some random guy from across the quad. He walked over, sat next to me, and we had a short conversation. He invited me to his room before my friends showed up and dragged me away. Turned out we lived in the same building. I went to his room and we talked and joked as though we'd known each other our entire lives. And constantly, this kick engineer student was complimenting me, the mediocre biology kid, on how smart I was. He and I ran into each other several times, and there was always a palpable tension between us. But I was in a long-distance relationship at the time, and I never went for it. I turned down the only guy to ever give me butterflies in my stomach and make me smile like an idiot. Edit. Thanks for popping my gold cherry, kind stranger. Now off to drown these strange, conflicted feelings with vodka. Story 4. In college, there was a guy who asked me out who was weird and annoying, so I said no. Next year, he came back hot as. Turns out he spent all summer working out. I regretted it until I invited him over one night and he stole my PS3 and my Yoda backpack. Edit. I got the Yoda backpack back. He was roommates with a friend of mine. He actually wore the backpack around the next day, and everyone knew it was mine. I feel like the worst part was the aftermath. I invited him over to hang out, and once I was reminded of his weirdness, I sent him on his way. Then the next day, he told everyone we hooked up and wore the backpack as proof. I was known as RHE Campus, and he sold the PS3 and took out my roommate on a date. That was a rough week. Edit 2. Grammar. Whoops. Story 5. I said no to a perfectly lovely guy who was just my type once because I was feeling a bit down and not like I could deal with the world of romance. I mentioned this to my best friend in passing one day, and it transpired that they knew each other. My best friend managed to dig me out of my shell enough to at least go out for a quick drink with him. 2 years later, I walked down the aisle towards him. We're now fulfilling a lifelong dream of mine by living in another country together and have a life full of love and adventure planned. Obviously, I'd never have known this to regret it, but it's incredible to think how different my life would be if I'd stuck with my original no. Story 6. One time I said no because I was too busy with my exams. I had my head buried in my books when he asked me. The timing was all wrong. I regret saying no. Story 7. Shitty mental health. Don't feel like I could have a healthy relationship because of it. Back in my teens, my self-esteem was so low, it was easier to believe otherwise really nice guys were trying to make fun of me rather than that they were actually interested. Some of them were guys I had crushes on for years. Yay. Story 8. Not really regretting, but I wish I had been someone else that could have given him a chance. He was all shy and cute and seemed like a genuinely good person. It was in the train. But I am in love with somebody else. Story 9. Had a guy ask me out in high school. Really fun guy. Very nice, funny, athletic, smart, and good-looking. I turned him down because I knew he had already had, and I wasn't ready to have at that time. It wasn't about his morals. I did desperately want to date him, but I just felt like I would never be able to make him happy, and I was embarrassed that I hadn't had. A few years later in college, I ran into him when I was home on break. He's still the perfect guy, hasn't changed a bit. I screwed the pooch on that one. Story 10. Obama asked me out when we were in high school. I thought he was too skinny and I let him down by saying, "You have more of a chance of becoming president than getting in my pants." Story 11. I did this event at the Queen Mary and could not stop staring at this guy. I just thought he was the most gorgeous thing on the planet. My event coordinator noticed and ended up bringing him over the last night when they had a ball. We walked around the deck, and when I told him how I had slipped and almost fell, he's like swooped me into a dip and said, "Like this?" He tried to teach me how to dance, which he was great at. Told me about how he traveled and loved school and all the same things as me. It was the best, most romantic night of my life. I had to go back to my group and he stopped me on the stairs to kiss me and said, "This is the last chance I'm going to have to do this. What do you want me to do?" I told him I needed him to keep walking because at the time I was in an on-again, off-again relationship with a total. I think about him all the time and beat myself up a lot for passing on someone so great for someone who didn't care about me. If I could redo one thing in my life, it'd be that night. Damn it. Edit. I know I am a complete he was unreal and how wonderful he was. Yes, I fully admit to being that girl who picked the butt. It was my first relationship and lesson was definitely learned. After stewing on this and beating myself up, I think I'm going to try to find him. He has a pretty uncommon name luckily. Last I heard he had a girlfriend, but we'll see. Edit 2. Contact has been made. I don't know what to do with myself now, haha. Story 12. Two guys come to mind. Guy 1 was so sweet, and I did like him, but he was going too fast for my liking, saying, "I love you too soon," etc. He somehow lost heart in pursuing a relationship with me when I told him to slow down as it was making me uncomfortable. We rekindled our thing a few years later, but it wasn't quite the same and it didn't amount to anything serious. He's now in a long-distance relationship with a beautiful girl. From what I can see from the outside of their relationship, he's a very sweet and devoted boyfriend. I sometimes think I missed out. Guy 2 was someone I really liked, but he was always talking to about other girls, so I didn't think he liked me that much. One day, he asked if I'll go out with him, but it was set up to seem like a joke, so I said, "No, that's ridiculous," because I didn't want to appear too eager and vulnerable. I found out later that he was serious, but he wanted to seem casual. This happened in high school, hence all these stupid games. He had moved on to other girls by the time I found out and went into a relationship with this girl. She was his first girlfriend. When they broke up, it devastated him. Then sometime after we got together, I was his rebound, so it was doomed from the start as he wasn't over her. I thought that if I had said yes to him when he asked me the first time, I would have been his first and he would have loved me that much. Story 13. Had a very close friend in high school who really liked me for years. I was his prom date and all, but when he started to want to be more than friends, I was really hesitant, so I said no and distanced myself, even though I knew I should have said yes. Long story short, I'm Sikh and was rebelling against my parents' wishes to be with a practicing Sikh. Such a stupid reason. We stayed friends though. In college, I started to like him even more, but we both had SOs. I kept thinking of telling him how I felt, but I kept these feelings in my head all throughout college without saying anything, and instead stayed with my douchebag of a SO. And then, when I was getting close to admitting everything to him, he passed away while on vacation with his family. Story 14. Till that girls will still say no to being asked out even if they like you and are available. So remember, no matter how much you think she likes you, asking her out is still just like starting a hardest difficulty game of Minesweeper on the smallest map. Story 15. I worked for several years with Harry. We had a lot of fun at work and also went out surfing, beach days, mutual friend stuff together too. Only gradually did I realize I was developing genuine feelings for him. I kept all this to myself, of course. He seemed way out of my league and I didn't want to make our work relationship awkward. Once he asked me if I'd go shopping with him to find some shoes. We went to the mall, found some kicks, and then he asked me if I wanted lunch. I said, "Nah, I wanted to work out before work, so see you later." Didn't understand he was maybe asking me to lunch as a date until much later. Idiot. We continued to work together and hang as friends though, and we both dated other people. Eventually, he left the job to travel and finish school, but still came by to hang out. One night we were all drinking, and we went out back to share a smoke. We were pretty drunk, and I was sitting on this raised box thing, and he stood in front of me and placed his hands on my knees, looked into my eyes and said, "Tinfoil Hardy Pat, I love you. I've never been able to say this before. I love you. I've loved you a long time." And I said, okay. Handed him the smoke and went back inside. I didn't know how to reply. I had inklings that he had feelings for me, but we never came out and said it. I had a boyfriend at the time and wouldn't cheat, so here I am. Harry, if you read this, I love you too. TL. Doctor. Worked for years with my possible soulmate. He confessed his love and I choked like a fool. Story 16. Well, there was this one guy who I served at the register I was working at who seemed nice and normal. He came back later and handed me his number, and I sort of wonder what would have happened if I called it. I lost the number, but I remember his name and know he probably lives in the area. Story 17. So I'm actually the guy in this story, but once I asked a girl in a chem lab at college out, turned out she had a boyfriend. But her smile when I asked her was bigger than I've seen from girls who said yes. Story 18. Wow, I can't believe how relevant this is to my situation. Throwaway just in case he or a friend recognizes this post. Don't want the surprise to be ruined. I had a really good friend in high school who, to put it lightly, was a man. We were really close. He would tell me everything about his sexual escapades with a variety of girls, some I knew, and some who were much older. Despite all these conversations, I started to fall for him. Underneath his reputation was someone kind and loving to all his friends. He was the type who would do anything for anyone. He was a great father figure to his younger siblings and was essentially the man of the house. Junior year, he revealed that he was starting to like me. He asked if I would be his date to our friend's annual New Year's party. But I was an assuming, ignorant and I brushed it off. I was hurt that he would try to get in my pants. I thought I meant more to him than just another girl to mess around with. I never told him how I felt about him. Instead, I cut off ties with him. I started to distance myself from him little by little with no explanation. He would try to talk to me, but I would try my hardest to avoid him altogether. I went away to college and he stayed in our hometown. After too much time thinking, I realized what I did was immature. Recently, we have started talking again and I apologized for being a huge. He told me he knew I'd come around again, but I'm happy to know he really does care for me still. He doesn't know it, but I'm going back home tonight for Christmas. I plan on surprising him. I'm going to ask him to be my date to the New Year's party our friend has every year. Edit. I took some of your advice and asked him earlier tonight if he had plans for New Year's. He already knew where the conversation was heading, cocky, and said yes. I'm so lucky things have fallen into place. Can't wait to see where things take us, and thanks everyone for your support. Story 19. He didn't ask me out, but we were super close. It was obvious that we both liked each other. Until my friends and I were playing a game where you would have to say who you preferred to date more in the group of friends. It was my turn, and I jokingly said another guy. Of course he was so shocked, and it was only a few days later that I realized my dumb mistake. I was so frustrated at myself that I didn't talk to him for a long time. We talk a bit now, but he has a girlfriend. So much regret. TLDR. Don't be afraid to tell the truth. Edit. Fixed typo. Thanks for replies, and I do realize that this was one of the most dumbest mistake I've ever made. D. I understand that some of you guys feel that I'm rude and stupid, and I can't argue with you there. On the other hand, I'm considering of telling him, but I'm afraid that it'll spread like shitty gossip. Anyway, thanks for the replies. Edit 2. Just a note. I jokingly said another guy because I was afraid of what my friends thought of me liking him. Sorry for the confusion. Story 20. Well, I met a beautiful Italian architect when I was studying abroad. He kept in touch over Facebook. As soon as I was single again, he sent me a message telling me that he would pay for my flight to Vienna where his parents live. Then, we would move to his flat in Paris. I said no. My education was too important. He got married to a gorgeous Russian girl a couple months later. Their wedding was straight out of a fairy tale. I would make the same decision again, but if I don't wonder what my life would be like. Story 21. A friend of mine has this cousin who I thought was top-tier fucking gorgeous for years. I always told my friend how handsome I thought he was, but I never really spoke to him and he never paid me much attention, so I figured he wasn't interested. Relatively recently, he broke up with a girl he was dating and spent a while just hanging around me and hitting on me. I'm in a serious relationship, so it wasn't going to happen, and he knew that, but all I could think was, where was this a while back? Totally regret not being able to say yes after that long. Story 22. In high school, I had a huge crush on this guy, but he was one of the popular guys and I wasn't. But as luck would have it, we sat beside each other in SOF English, and he must have thought I was pretty funny because he was laughing at my jokes. Fast forward to the end of the year, he and his GF broke up, and after class we held hands all the way to the bus stop. I was so friggin' shy that I bolted when he tried to kiss me. We didn't talk much afterwards. I regret being shy. Story 23. Way back in middle high school, kids didn't really ask kids out. But I did hear that a kid had a crush on me, and my response was less than inviting. So nothing ever came of that naturally. Fast forward 10 years later, and now I find him very attractive, wishing I had been more open to his crush back then. Now he's married, and I'm sitting in single girl sweatpants in my apartment. Maybe I'd be in my married girl sweatpants if I hadn't been such a prude back then. Story 24. Sort of, because he never asked directly. Like, he hinted at it enough that I really should have gotten the picture, but I wasn't thinking about starting anything because I was moving 4 states away in less than a week. It's 3 months later and I still think about what could have been sometimes. Story 25. A guy asked out a girl I work with a while back. She said no, very rudely. She's very materialistic, certainly a gold digger. That guy ended up being Luke Wilson, tight end for the Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks. She is very regretful. Story 26. At an end of summer party, this nice guy gave me his number. I was very shy and kept putting off calling him because I was nervous. Then I got caught up in the excitement of starting my first year at university, and I honestly just forgot about it. Passed him months later in the hallway at university, and he gave me this incredibly wounded puppy dog look and kept walking. I felt terrible. I hadn't thought it was a big deal for him. I know now it's pretty much always a big deal for a guy to work up that courage. Story 27. One night long ago on Facebook Messenger, a boy asked me out. I was just under 2 months into my freshman year of college. He was still in high school. I said no. I couldn't do the long distance, nor did I want to be tied down or feel guilty with all the partying. We still hang out a few times a year. Yet we never bring up that conversation. Story 28. No, can't say I said no to anyone who asked. Did I wish I had just grabbed that brown-eyed idiot who was in all my classes and told them how I felt? Yes, with my whole being. Story 29. I had a boyfriend, and we were in the early, happy stage of the relationship. I went to leave for work one day and was waiting at a bus stop when a guy crossed the street to come ask me out. I said something dumb like, "I'm sorry, I have a boyfriend." Soon after that day, the boyfriend I had made me realize he was not the right person for me. I was a housekeeper back then, and people tend to give the housekeeper liquor at Christmas. I had a very nice collection going on, put about 12 bottles on top of the fridge. Boyfriend drank them all within a week. I broke up with him because I just wasn't down for alcoholism. I always wished I'd said yes to the guy at the bus stop because he'd clearly been someone interesting and kind. But years went by, I met my husband, and now I'm not interested in anyone else. Story 30. My mom was waiting for this guy to get off stage so she could interview him for Buddy magazine when this little weird guy comes over and asks her out. Her actual words were, "He was way too ugly. I was just too good for him," after I asked her why she shut him down. The guy turned out to be Stevie Ray Vaughan. She said that when the guy she was waiting for finally got off stage, the little guy got up and did a couple of songs. She instantly regretted treating him like that and tried to talk to him afterward. He told her, "I wasn't good enough for you before I played and nothing's changed." Story 31. Haha, nope! When I was younger, I said yes to everyone I was even remotely attracted to, and subsequently got to be an expert at extricating myself from any sort of relationship. Eventually, it got to be too much hassle, and I just allowed myself to be single for a good long while because I just didn't want to have to get dumped, or tell my stories to even one more new person. I did, however, have a big regret about dumping a guy. We're dating again, but it's been more than 25 years since we dated the first time. So much time lost. Story 32. He never exactly asked me out, but this dude, let's call him Dylan, and I were dance partners in the 3rd grade. Dylan was sweet, but I only had eyes for Patrick. In high school, Dylan had become Greek statue-level hot and confessed that he'd always had a crush on me. I was already dating someone else and I missed out. Story 33. It was my sophomore year of college, and I had a boyfriend. A nice enough guy, but a total stoner without an ounce of ambition. He was away on a weekend get-stoned with my buddies trip, and I was bored and walking across campus to the Student Union building. It was a cold, blustery weekend, and it was honest to God like something out of a rom-com. I dropped a stack of papers and they started blowing around, and up runs the football player dude who'd been flirting with me off and on in one of my classes. He asked me if I wanted to go get some coffee for my poor freezing hands, and I said, "What the?" We opted for cocoa instead, and sat there for nearly 2 hours. It turns out he was an honors student and only played football to get the scholarship he needed. He was funny and really smart and so freaking gorgeous. I couldn't believe he was talking to me. He told me he came to see all my shows, I was a theater major. And he finally asked if he could see me again, really see me. And I wanted to say yes so badly, but I also couldn't cheat on my boyfriend either. I turned him down, and he told me if I changed my mind, to let him know. I ended up staying with Stoner Boy for another few months, and by then, Football Dude had a girlfriend. I looked him up on Google once a few years back. He ended up becoming a doctor. He chairs the Special Olympics Committee in his hometown, and he seems like he's still a terrific guy. He'll always be one I wish I could go back and say yes to. Story 34. Yes? My best friend asked me to be his girlfriend when we were 16. I told him that I didn't want to ruin our friendship if things went wrong and we were better off as friends. I desperately wanted to say yes, but I didn't feel like he deserved to be saddled with my problems. I had been raped a few weeks before and wasn't in a healthy state of mind at that point. To this day, more than 10 years later, I question what would have happened if I had said yes. He's godfather to my child and still one of my best friends. He's been married and divorced, and when I ran into his ex-wife, who I never liked to begin with, she said they divorced because she couldn't stand that he was still in love with his best friend. I'm in a relationship with a great guy right now, and we're living together, and I can see this relationship lasting, but just on occasion, I can't help but wonder what would have happened if I gave my best friend a chance to be more than just my friend. Story 35. This is my wife's story, but it involves me. We were high school sweethearts, and shortly after we started dating, she was asked to go to a school dance by Larry Fitzgerald. She turned him down, noting she had a boyfriend. When she told me about it that evening, she was surprised to hear my reaction, which was that she fucking blew it. At this point, Larry was already an athletic freak. Even in the 10th or 11th grade, it was clear this guy was going on to big things. As life progressed and my wife and I started a family, Larry's career progressed and he continued to excel. I would occasionally remark to my gal that Larry had just hit another milestone, killing it at Pitt, winning awards and so on. When the draft approached and he was projected as a top 3 pick, I again pointed out that she blew it. She would always respond with, "But I was with you," or "He was kinda weird anyway." When he was selected third by the Cards, I again pointed out how she blew it. She shrugged it off. A couple weeks later, I walk into the kitchen and she's holding the sports page. I ask what she's reading and she just says, "I fucking blew it," handed me the paper, and walked away. The headline said something along the lines of, "Fitzgerald agrees the 60 Nailers contact." Story 36. Right after high school, a guy I used to flirt with asked me out. Before he asked me out, we would always talk and text. I remember him mentioning how he wanted 4 kids and that he likes to last for hours. But before he asked me out, I was already talking to someone, an older guy. He had no job, divorced, 2 kids, no car, and lived at home. The high school guy knew I was talking to the older guy, but since I wasn't committed yet, he figured he'd ask. I told him no, because I remembered that he wanted 4 kids and to last forever. Such stupid reasons to not date anyone. I chose the deadbeat instead. We reconnected after he returned home from deployment, 3 years later. I was single as was he, we had, and it only lasted 10 minutes. Hung out a lot and just enjoyed each other. He had just gotten out of a long-term relationship, so when I brought up dating him, he had said no. Fast forward to now, we still talk here and there. He is stationed a state away, and every single day I think about him. I regret everything. I regret choosing my ex over him. I hate myself for doing that. I think he was the one too. Story 37. I had a girl in my 3rd grade class call me over to her side of the classroom. I got up and went over where her and her friends were sitting. She then asked me if I wanted to be her boyfriend in front of her friends. My eyes got wide, and I think I stuttered a yes. She then starts laughing and says, "Just kidding," and all of her friends started cackling. I shrugged and said, "Oh, okay," went back to my seat and sat down with my arms crossed on my desk and head buried between them. I was so humiliated I didn't want to see anyone looking at me since the whole class heard. Sigh. Fuck you, Lindsay. I still kicked your at spelling at the end of the week. Story 38. Yes. It's funny that this question popped up on here right now because I was actually thinking about this. I didn't even reject the guy when he asked. I met with him 2 times for coffee and put him in the friend zone as quickly as possible because I didn't want a relationship, any relationship, at that point. But I liked the guy enough to want him as a friend. Nowadays, I regret this a lot because I have realized I like him more than that while he has come to keep his distance from me. It sucks as he is one of the few guys I feel or have felt some sort of connection with, but, well, that's life. Story 39. I'm a guy speaking for a girl, but this story always breaks my heart. I asked a girl out while she was a waitress at a pizza place. She agreed to go out as friends, and I spent the next 6 months politely picking her up, taking her to lunch or dinner and doing my best to not pressure her away from me. I was in the friend zone with no signs of escaping. My boss gave me great tickets to go see the SF Giants at Candlestick Park, so I invited her. She agreed. Neither of us were baseball fans, but it seemed like it would be a great experience. It wasn't. It was freezing, we had no idea what was happening, and when I suggested we leave, she agreed. I drove her home, and as I was walking her to the door, I grasped her hand, the first time we had held hands. She yanked her hand back. I remember the words very clearly. "It's too fast." Okay, message received. She had moved a distance away from me, so I let things go. I stopped calling her, and she made no effort to contact me. Goodbye, Deborah. Several years later, I had met somebody else and had actually become engaged. I got a phone call from Deborah. She was hoping to get together. I told her that I was in a serious relationship, so perhaps it wasn't a good idea. We chit-chatted a bit and said our goodbyes. A week or so later, I got a card from her explaining how much she regretted pushing me away and that she considered me the one that got away. The funny thing is that I was so madly in love with her. To this day, I think of her. My wife is amazing and I am so very lucky, but I always wonder what would have happened. Story 40. Haha. Yeah, guys. Men ask me out like the whole time. They should call me a girl who gets asked out a lot. Because I get asked out so often. You want me to remember one I rejected? Yeah, I totally could if I thought about it, but I can't now because so many men have asked me out. Yeah, I have a virtual herd of penises after me and get to have whenever I want. My life's awesome. Single tear runs down cheek eel. Story 41. Last year in college, I had a crush on this guy who lived down the hall from me. I had a boyfriend, though, who I felt very strongly for despite him not treating me all that well. Whenever I was upset that my boyfriend had canceled another date to get high with his friends, the guy down the hall would invite me over and make me tea and we'd watch Doctor Who. He'd also make me poutine and bring it to my door every so often. He was a complete sweetheart, but I was convinced I was in love with my boyfriend. Fast forward about a week, my boyfriend breaks up with me in a fast food burrito place. The guy down the hall made me tea. A few weeks later, the guy down the hall asked me out, and I said yes. But the whole time I felt awkward because I was still convinced I was in love with my now ex. I wanted so badly to want to go out with him because he was great and attractive and so smart. But I knew I needed time. I was afraid that if I told him all of that, he'd take it as rejection. A friend of mine told me that's what would happen. So I just decided to put some space between us and hope he would still want to go out when some time had passed. About 3 weeks later, wounds had healed and I went to his door to see if he wanted to have tea. His roommate answered, and I saw him look very awkward and say, um, he's sleeping. I'll tell him you stopped by. He got a new girlfriend. A year later, he's still with her. I want to be happy for him, but I still regret everything. I ended up getting back together with my ex. He was absolutely horrible to me for about 3 months, and we broke up again for good. Story 42. I worked several summers in high school, and after graduation at the customer service desk at a family-owned grocery store in my hometown. Check cashing, Western Union, Lotto, smokes, etc. The last year I did this before I left for college, very regularly, this Hispanic guy my age would come in to cash his paycheck. I didn't speak more than a few words of Spanish, and he didn't seem to speak any English, but oh man, was he hot? I'd get really flustered every time he came in. It seemed like he made an effort to come in when I was working, because he'd come in almost every week even when my schedule would change, and we'd both just smile and sort of alternate between staring at each other and avoiding eye contact while I cashed his check. After a while, he'd come in just to buy a candy bar or something, and come to my desk instead of the regular checkout lanes. I didn't think it would go anywhere since I didn't speak any Spanish, and he didn't speak any English. But there we were, every week. I'd look forward to seeing him and just melt every time he came in. And then, one day, he came up to my desk, and in the most adorably broken English I could never imitate, he asked me if I wanted to go out after work. I was so ridiculously flustered. I was so shy, and so socially awkward and so insecure that I'd convinced myself that never in a million years would this fairy tale story of teen romance, despite the language barrier, actually become anything more than a fantasy. To this day, about 13 years later, I still kick myself for being so stupid. When he asked me, like an idiot, I stammered and said something about not being allowed to date customers, which is complete BS BDW. My dad met my mom in that exact store while he was checking. The cute Hispanic guy looked crushed, and inwardly, I was crushed by my own stupidity or social awkwardness. He didn't even buy whatever it was he was trying to buy. Left the Snickers bar on the counter and left. I went home after my shift and just cried. I told my dad about it. He worked at the store too. And I remember him laughing at me in this sympathetic way. I must have looked really devastated. And he said that next time he came in, I should just be brave and try to talk to him again and tell him I'd been mistaken about the rules about dating employees. But I never ever saw him again. And then I went to college, and even though I worked at the store again between semesters, I never saw him again. I still remember this guy, and I still hate myself for being so stupid. Oldrine. I speak no Spanish and he spoke no English, but super hot Hispanic guy. And I crush really hard on each other for weeks at my job between high school and college. It was like a strange modern fairy tale. He gets to ask me out in English, and I stupidly reject him because I was a super socially awkward and insecure teenager. Never saw him again. Still regret it 13 years later. Edit. Did the math. It was 13 years ago, not 15. Story 43. In high school, I was asked to go to homecoming by this great guy. I said no because I couldn't afford a dress. I was too embarrassed to tell him or anyone else about it. He ended up going with someone else, and I always regretted not being able to go. I wish I could have said yes. Story 44. Yes. When I was in college, I had a FWB who went to the university in the same town who I had a really great time with. I was very into just casual at the time, so when I started to feel like we could be more, I broke it off. He was quirky and nerdy and adorable and fucking smart. He was goofy, and I wasn't comfortable with my goofiness at that point in my life. He was also shorter than I am, and that was a big no-no back then too. But I wish I could have another shot. He was quirky and nerdy and adorable and goofy and fucking smart. All the things I want now. I'm more comfortable with who I am, and I'm no longer interested in casual. At the very least, I regret that I didn't break things off well or naturally. If I could find him now, I would, and I would beg for another chance. Edit regarding downvotes. Why ask the question if you don't want to hear the answer?